Have you ever wondered, are you actually truly an addict to buying more discs? Well, today you can actually see how you compare with everyone else and who is buying the most amount of plastic based upon a player or brand association. So again, all this data is being referenced from the 2023 fandom survey by Ultiworld. And once again, we have some very interesting data points that I was very surprised we're actually able to glean, because it seems like it's so in the weeds, so niche, that I didn't really expect this to be the finale, but I am very glad that we got this. And the first couple data points was probably the most interesting out of the entire article, and that was how many discs do you own and how many did you buy this year? And a lot of us, while we do have a little bit of copium, we're like, oh, I didn't buy that many. When you actually get into the raw nitty-gritty numbers, I think it is very interesting how much you do spend in a year on disc golf, whether it be tournaments, whether it be bags or discs, it never seems to end, or watching DGN or registering for a PGA membership. There's a lot that goes into being a disc golfer, even though people say it's just owning a bag and a couple discs. All right, so as far as general ownership of discs, so if you have a single bag and that's all you have, you probably have 20 discs. But for a lot of us, it's going to be a lot more than that. So the biggest majority of people were 26 to 50 with 19%. And this definitely seems to be a bit of a lie, I would have to say, because pretty much everybody that I have ever played with has more than that. So I don't know who these 19% are, but this was the majority, so we have to believe that this is kind of the consensus. And another point to bring up is that this was gathered by people that are probably very actively into the disc golf community. So for the most popular section to be 26 to 50 is very intriguing. But then after that, coming in second and third place with around 14% was 51 to 75 and 101 to 150. And this feels a lot more in tune to what I believe true disc golfers are, because I definitely feel like every player that I hang out with, they always have a new disc coming, or they're trying out a new disc, or they're trying something new with an old disc that they kind of forgot about. There's just so many people's bags that are constantly evolving, including mine, which it really needs to stop because that does not help my game whatsoever. But we are always seemingly trying something new, and it may not even be for the benefit of our own game. It's probably just to try something new because it's so much fun to try new plastic. And much the same way that my $35 disc was ridiculous, but now that I have it and have thrown it a decent amount, I am just really loving it. And then on the extremes, this was also very, very interesting. 4.4% had 500 or more discs. And I think I'm pretty intense. I do not even have close to 500. I probably have 200, 250. And that's including a bunch of just janky putters that I have not thrown away yet, even though I probably need to. So that was also very, very insane to hear. But if you think about it, every pro has at least 500, if not more. So these are definitely people that we know. We just don't really think about it that much because obviously they're the top elite players. They're going to have a lot of discs. But the biggest interesting data point out of all of this was the percent of people that had no discs. I don't know who these people are. I don't know who would do a disc golf fandom survey and not own a single disc, not even a starter set, which makes me think they're probably lying. But this is data we have to just assume is true, and that was 11 respondents. 11 people said they do not own a single disc. And then the following data point we're given is the amount of discs that people bought in the last 12 months. And this also feels very in line with what I kind of believe to be true. That was that the majority, basically half of the people responding, bought between 6 to 20 discs. And if you think 20 is a lot, well, just kind of think about it. And I bet that you've probably purchased a couple in before the season starts, so January to March, probably a couple replacements, and then towards Black Friday, I bet you bought between maybe 3 to 6. So over the course of an entire year, 20 does seem like a lot, and it is a lot, but it isn't that much in comparison to what you truly think about a year to be. And then with the higher percentage, with 31 or more, was 16% of people. So 31 does feel like a decent amount. I will say I've definitely bought more than 31, but that is also because I'm using these for videos, and I try to get a lot of different benchmarks for data because I don't want to only throw what I know. I want to always kind of try to evolve and see what the market is doing, because I see a lot of people throwing different stuff and I want to make videos about that. So that is a bit of copium and some more, but I believe that to be a valid reason to buy some more discs. And then 2% of people said they didn't buy any discs the entire 12 months. Once again, I just don't know who these people are. I don't know a single year that has gone by where I'm not thinking about at least purchasing a disc. And then the article went into more depth about these super buyers that bought 30 or more discs, and this was also very interesting. With these quote-unquote super buyers buying a lot more Discmania compared to everyone else. But with that said, they still do favor the top brands, which is Innova, MVP, and Discraft. And according to this, only 18% of those super buyers were not PDGA members, which obviously makes sense. Who is going to buy a lot of discs if they're not constantly trying to go out there, be competitive, and try to really be a top elite player, and at least try to compete with everyone else. And along with that, they were also a lot more likely to watch disc golf media with a 10% higher rating. And obviously, if you're going to do all this, you probably are going to be playing daily, and that was definitely true with a 13% increase in the amount of people that were playing daily as compared to the rest of the field. And to go along with this data point, about 50% of people that did buy 1 to 5 discs were in that category of only playing a few times a year, which does seem to be accurate. Like if you're going to be playing hardly at all, you're probably not going to be buying a whole lot of discs. So that totally makes sense. Most of the weekly players only bought 6 to 10 discs, which is kind of surprising. I expect people that play weekly to kind of be a little bit more engaged, but that is still about 1 disc a month, and I kind of feel like I would do that if I wasn't doing YouTube. But like I said before, the biggest category for people that were playing daily were 11 to 12 discs per year. And then on to probably the most interesting thing of the entire article: have you purchased a Signature Series disc by any of the top pros? And then following that up with, have you ever purchased a Signature Series disc by a top pro, and has that been in the last 12 months? And then the final correlation was, if that was in the last 12 months, was it somebody that you rated a 10 out of 10 on the fandom score? So this was definitely a very interesting data point, with the number of people buying a Paul disc ever was 54%, and Simon coming in at 50%. So it is very clear that doesn't matter if you're a top pro, doesn't matter if you're kind of crushing it at the moment, people will definitely buy your discs over time if they like you or really value your game. And as far as FPO, it was 32% for Paige and 29% for Kristin. And with a huge drop off from there, it was 11% for Haley King, which does kind of beg the question, what is the value of an FPO Signature Series disc? I personally think it is a great market. It is matching so many AMs out there with the amount of control and speed and kind of understability that they typically have, and they are usually lightweight. And I kind of feel like if it wasn't for the huge assumption that MPO discs are just like better for some reason, then people would be buying up these FPO discs way more often, but that does not seem to be the trend. So with that said, let's move on to who has bought a Signature Series disc in the last 12 months, which is going to be pretty similar to before, but with a couple of key changes. So number one being 40% for Simon, which is by far a huge margin among the rest. He's coming off of the first year at MVP, and he had some amazing discs. Not only did they look cool, they fit a great slot in most people's games, and everybody generally has a love for MVP, so it was just a perfect recipe for success. But what is more surprising here is that Paul only had 26% of people replying that they did buy a Tour Series disc in 2023. And then at number 3, 21% for Calvin. And it does seem pretty shocking to me to think that Paul's number of percentage of people that actually bought his discs is pretty similar to Calvin. Like, I love Calvin probably more than Paul, but I generally feel like the overall notion about Paul is just so much higher than Calvin. But that does seem to be a little bit off the mark, because people are definitely favoring Calvin generally more than Paul, because he is so much more on tour. He has such a lighthearted personality, and we get to see so much more of him, with Paul being kind of out of the picture for the year of 2023. But on to FPO, it is a total flip from the previous chart, because KT has 19.46% of people saying that they bought her disc, whereas Paige only has 8.62%. So it definitely does seem to be the trend that Paige is losing a lot of popularity recently, and that could be very similar to Paul, where they're just not really in the limelight as much, so they don't really get the same amount of love as they would in previous years. But to end it, let's go over who has the top percentage of people that rated a certain player a 10 out of 10 and bought their Tour Series disc. Now you may think this is just kind of like a runaway, like obviously Simon's gonna beast it up because so many people bought his disc, but that was actually not the case. It was a very neck and neck race, but Paul actually came on top with 0.2% higher than Simon, with Paul getting a 47% of people buying their disc with a 10 on the fandom score, whereas Simon only had 46.93. But because this is a much more specific data point, we get to see some other very interesting stuff. So Eagle has a 40%, Ricky has a 36%, Brody has a 34%, which is just shocking, because I don't even know really what Brody's disc selection is other than the Get Freaky Zone, but very interesting. And Calvin comes in at number 5 with a 32.8%. So I think this is very indicative of, even though people love Calvin, they may not necessarily buy his Signature Series disc nearly as much as others. Now this could just be because there's like Innova fatigue. People don't want to buy Innova because there's so much better plastic out there, sort of. Kind of depends on what your preference is. But it does seem to be like people are favoring new plastic, and generally if it's MVP or Clash or some of the up and coming brands, they're going to favor that much more to buy a Signature Series disc. And what is kind of backed up by that data point is the Innova FPO team has one of the lowest percentages of people that bought Signature Series disc but still rated players 10 out of 10, with that list including Kat Merch, Hannah Blumroos, and Evelina Salonen. And just a small additional note here, we typically think of Kevin as like kind of like the GOAT, like everyone loves him. He may not have had the best year, probably one of his worst years in recent history, but with that said, I thought he would have a much higher rating than others in his kind of general category, but that was very much not the case, with Nicholas and Kyle having between 22 to 25%, but Kevin was way far behind with only 12%. So it does seem to be like, even though he has the huge Prodigy deal, he has a lot of Tour Series discs, people are not buying his discs nearly as much as others, even though they did rate him 10 out of 10. So with all that said, I have to give a huge shout out to Josiah Zuidsma and Jesse Jesse Weiss, who I actually spoke with at Worlds, one of the most in-depth and very much is not afraid to get in the weeds. He's very much one of those people that gets super involved in the nitty-gritty details, and I am so glad that he was able to post all these articles for Ultiworld. So I highly recommend you guys check out all of his articles on Ultiworld. You will not regret it. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe. Wild Runs, signing out. Peace.